to the chair. We are live on Facebook.
All right, I'll go ahead and call to order the December meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors. Good evening, and thanks to all for being here. We'll go ahead and read our electronic meeting notice.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency, this meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors is being held electronically, pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.2 A.3, the Continuity of Government Ordinance, adopted by the Alexandria City Council on June 20, 2020 to undertake essential business. All members of the board and staff are participating from remote locations through a Zoom meeting. This meeting continues to be held electronically, unless a determination is made that it is safe enough to be held in person, at the Alexandria Transit Company Boardroom, 3000 Business Center Drive, Alexandria, Virginia. Electronic access will be provided in either event. The meeting can be accessed via Zoom and Facebook, and recordings are posted on YouTube and the website. Public comment will be accepted via Zoom. A Zoom registration link is available on the website. Alternatively, requests for public comment can be made during the public comment period by utilizing the raise hand feature. This meeting is being recorded.
Madam Clerk, would you please go ahead and call the roll?
Chair Kaplan.
Here.
Vice Chair Kleist.
Here.
Linda Bailey. Larry Chambers.
Present.
Randy Collins.
Present.
Ian Greaves. Matt Harris.
Here.
Jim Kapsis. Hillary Orr.
Here.
Ajay Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. Chair Kaplan, you have a quorum, and the following members are currently absent: Linda Bailey, Ian Greaves, and Jim Kapsis.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ian indicated he's under the weather, so he won't be joining us tonight. I think Jim is going to be here, although he had, I know, some childcare issues that he was dealing with as well. Is Mark Jinks on the Zoom?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Oh, Mark, welcome. Well, we're going to go ahead and take item 4A out of order, which is recognizing our outgoing city manager. And Mark, we're delighted that you're able to be here with us today. Mark, I've known you for several years. You, as a deputy city manager, were a member of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors, and we had the pleasure of getting to serve together. But in your role as city manager, you have been a champion for transit and for Dash, allowing us to do a lot of very creative and innovative things, including the free fares, helping champion the ATV, ensuring that the Dash had resources that it needed to navigate COVID. And so we wanted to recognize you because on the occasion of your retirement, to just remember all of the contributions that you've made and really allowing the system to grow. You've had a very long and distinguished career for Alexandria as well as Arlington County, and are an expert on municipal finance and good city government, and we're going to miss you greatly. So we have a proclamation that I'm going to read and ask the board to approve, and we have a picture of a plaque that will be making its way to you as a keepsake to remember Dash 5. So I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation. And it says, presented to Mark Jinks, whereas the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors on this 8th day of December 2021 have gathered to meet and to express special recognition to Mark Jinks and to honor him for his distinguished 45-year career in state and local government. And whereas Mark has served the city of Alexandria since 1999 in a variety of roles, including chief financial officer, deputy city manager, and is recognized as a national and international expert in the areas of public finance and economic development. Whereas Mark has worked consistently for the betterment of the residents and businesses of the city, and whereas the Board of Directors, staff Board of Directors, wishes to express its sincere appreciation to Mark for his dedication to transit and his recognition of its importance to the community. And whereas this proclamation is presented to highlight that although he is retiring, Mark will always be remembered as a champion of Dash and an advocate for transit who dedicated his time to his work and the community we serve. Now, therefore, I, David Kaplan, chair of the Alexandria Transit Company, And on behalf of the Dash Board of Directors, we hereby present this proclamation to Mr. Mark Jinks as a testimonial to the faithful and dedicated service which he has performed, with our best wishes, continued success and happiness now and in the future. I'm just going to share one other anecdote about Mark that because we only have one page, I couldn't include it in the proclamation, but I think it bears repeating. Mark, very early in your tenure as city manager, you came to one of our Dash banquets. We used to do an employee recognition event at the Hilton Mark Center. It's now, before COVID, it had morphed into more of an informal picnic so employees could bring their young children, but it was kind of a swanky event with a band. And I remember you gave a very nice speech and the band started playing and you and your wife, Eileen, then went out on the dance floor and you danced circles around everybody else. I was not on the dance floor, but I was sitting next to Carrie Donnelly and we both were watching and just saying, this is not the Mark Jinks we know, when we were talking about in the weeds on budget and policy issues. And Carrie took out his phone and said, this has to be recorded. And so Carrie Donnelly may have a video of you and your wife just really having a great time out on the dance floor. And it warmed my heart to see that side of you, Mark, because it was something as we sat together for several years, just an element of your personality that I didn't get to know. And while I know you have lots of great plans, I hope that wherever retirement takes you, you and your wife have a lot of opportunities to dance together. So congratulations to you on your retirement. We'll go ahead and move the proclamation. And then Mark, if you want to say any words to us, we'd be happy to recognize you. So I'll ask my colleagues if there's a motion to move the proclamation.
Motion to move the proclamation, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Steve.
I'll second it.
Second by, was that Matt or Jim? All right, we'll give it to Jim.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, proclamation passes. Mark, is there anything you'd like to say to us?
Sure. First, I'd like to thank the dashboard for this proclamation. Transit has been in my DNA since I was, I think, 16, where I grew up in central Pennsylvania. I was made a member of the Transit Subsidy Committee, which subsidized the private sector. It was right at a time period before all the private bus companies went out of business. And then I was a charter member of a transit authority, and I think they serve like 4 million passengers a year now. It helped create the transit systems on Penn State's campus, which has been free from day one. So transit had a lot of experience as a kid, and then it just carried over. And I was fortunate enough, the city had a solid dash bus system, and we've been working on, ratcheting it up as far as service and quality, and particularly the ability. I was so pleased when the mayor brought forward the Let's Make Dash Free. Because it's a false, I think it's a false structure to say that transit ought to pay, but folks who drive cars or don't have to. So I think that we're in the right place, and we've got a lot of work left to do. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to live in the community. So I look forward to being a passenger and a customer of Dash, and seeing you make further progress in the future.
Well, thank you, Mark. And again, we are so pleased to have had your support and stewardship. We've really grown the transit system. We've done a lot of great things, and having someone like you championing it in the city manager's office has just been an incredible gift to us. And we will miss you greatly, and we wish you all the best in retirement.
Thank you.
All right, so we will move back to our regular agenda now. We'll go ahead and I'll ask staff if anyone has registered for public comment.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We had one person that submitted a comment for this meeting, but I do not believe they've actually registered or are in attendance. Yes, I don't see their name on the list. So I will go ahead and read the comment to you. This is from Anna SB, who writes, awesome and refreshing service since the upgrade. Do hope it doesn't change, but be safe, constant, and reliable as it now stands. Great job.
Well, thank you. That's great. We always like praise. I'm going to now ask if there's anyone who has not yet registered who would like to be recognized to speak for up to 3 minutes. We had on the prior slide just some rules and parameters regarding how public comment will work. We do have a hourglass here on the slide that you can use to monitor your progress during the 3 minutes and to know when your time is up. If you are able to use the raise hand feature in Zoom, please do so, or put in the chat so staff can see that you wish to be recognized. We'll pause for a minute, see if anybody seeks recognition. Has anyone sought recognition?
I do not see any raised hands, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. So
Oh,
we'll go
excuse me,
ahead.
wait, sorry, one moment. One just popped up.
Okay.
Stephanie Ship.
Hi, this is Stephanie Ship, and I'm a regular Dash rider. I also receive the federal subsidy every month on my Metro card. And so it's like, I guess I'm just wondering how, since I haven't been involved in earlier meetings, I'm curious about the financing of the free Dash rides, and have you seen an increase in ridership? And for those of us who do get a federal subsidy, could we pay or contribute to it? So that's just asking some questions about it that I've been curious since this was put in place.
Thank you for your comments. We actually are going to this evening have a report on ridership since the changes that were made. Actually, very, very encouraging news. And even on some routes in the West End, we're actually exceeding our pre-COVID ridership, and our weekend ridership looks great. The only thing that we're a little lagging behind, and this makes sense with continued investments in telework, is our peak period ridership. But we're moving in a direction where we're providing significant all-day service, and we're seeing the public respond to that. And so if you're able to stay around, our Director of Planning and Scheduling, Martin Barna, will be presenting some really encouraging statistics. I too am a federal employee who, that was a question I had when we were moving towards the free fares, which City Council had funded. And there's actually now state money through a program called TRIPS that is going to defray significant part of the costs over the next few years for the city to be able to provide free rides. But that was something that had given me some pause, because I knew that much of my commuting expenses were being paid for by my employer when I was commuting into the office. But yeah, it's something, a revenue source that we won't, the Dash will not be able to tap. But City Council weighed that against the significant benefits that come with providing the free service. And you just heard our city manager, our outgoing city manager, talk about why he was a big advocate for free fares. But yes, that is a revenue source that we will no longer have. I'll ask staff, Josh or Martin, if there's anything you want to add to what was said.
I'll defer to Martin if he wants to add anything here, but this is a discussion item that has come up in various meetings, and we have been evaluating how much of the ridership, both pre-COVID and during COVID, was associated with those programs, and what the loss of that revenue is. But to my knowledge, we don't have a direct control over how that gets handled from the federal level. So I'll let Martin add anything, but those are the only comments I have.
I think you guys covered it well. Thank you.
Well, Ms. Shipley, thank you for attending. I encourage you to stick around, because we're going to really do a deep dive into what's been going on ridership and some of the trends that we're seeing.
Okay, that's great. And I support the endeavor. If there's a source of revenue that could be also earned, I just was curious about the thinking behind that. So thank you. You answered my question.
Thank you. Staff, any other speakers? Okay, all right. Josh is shaking his head. So we will close public comment, move on to consideration approval of the November meeting minutes, which were included in the board packet. Are there any revisions or corrections to the minutes as they were presented? And if not, I'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the minutes from our November meeting.
Moved by Matt. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Brandon. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll abstain since I wasn't at the last meeting.
Okay, Larry, thank you. So we'll note your abstention. Item 3, I'll move into the chair report, and we've already done our special recognition for Mark, and I'm really glad we were able to do that because like I said, we're losing someone who was a real champion for transit and really helped Dash to be in the position that it's in today. So I'm glad we were able to take that time. 2 other items that I want to touch on. One is a potential change to our bylaws, and I'm actually holding a copy of the printed bylaws. You're not going to be able to see this on the Zoom, but all of you should have a copy of the bylaws. It was probably given to you when you joined the board. We did a significant update to our bylaws in 2020. The stockholders, which are city council members, have to approve any changes to the bylaws, and we cleaned up a lot of things that had just sort of carried over from the 80s that weren't really relevant anymore. But there was one other item that that I had some that I'd wanted to address with them. We didn't do it in 2020, and I'd like to take it to them in February when we have the next stockholders meeting. And it involves the composition of the board of directors. So there's on page 4 of the bylaws in Article 2 on the board in Section 1 outlines who shall serve on the board of directors. And among the citizen members, there are 2 requests for citizen members who have special expertise. One is for a city resident with transportation experience, and the other is for a city resident with financial experience. And these were changes that were made. The board was reconstituted in around 2012, 2013, and those citizen members with specific expertise were added at that time. The city resident with transportation experience makes a lot of sense, and we actually have right now at least 2 people on the board who fill that requirement. We don't, to my knowledge, have anyone who fills on the city resident side the financial experience seat. And I may be misremembering some of your backgrounds and professional experience, and that may not be true. We may actually have someone with financial experience, but it had been Carrie Donnelly who left our board in 2020. And thinking about conversation we had with council in 2020 about what was important for our board, and hearing from them that balance within the community and a board that reflects the makeup of the community and the people who ride our system as being kind of the overarching concerns of how our board is constituted, it makes me wonder if next time we recruit for a citizen member and we would have to recruit someone who has financial expertise, that we would be very limited in the applications we would be able to consider. And I would like to, instead of having that as a mandate that we have, would like to have that as something that is highly desirable, that we would include in an announcement when we send out and say what kind of people, who would succeed in a volunteer position such as this. Keeping in mind also that we do have the city manager controls 3 appointees to our board, and one of which is a city staff member with financial expertise, and that's Ian Greaves, our city controller. At times we actually had 2 city staff members from the budget finance area, if you remember when Lisa Henty served on our board as well, along with Ian. So I would like to ask the stockholders in February to remove that requirement and instead simply have so the city resident with transportation experience, and then the rest of the citizen members simply being citizen members. We would have to vote on that in January in order to send that to the stockholders in February. So I'm teeing that up now so you can give that some thought before our next meeting. And we'll make sure, since you might not have the bylaws handy, that in January we'll include this section in the packet so you can see and follow along with what I'm talking about. I would also ask that, because when we go to the stockholders, if we were to approve this and we say, we don't, as I would say right now, to my knowledge, we don't have anyone who fills that seat with financial experience, that may not be true. And so if any of you feel that you actually do fill that seat, it's written fairly broadly. It doesn't say specifically you have an accounting background or you have a budgeting background or a municipal finance background. But if somebody feels that they fill that seat, that's important information to know and to take into consideration in January when we review this. So I'll just ask you to think about that. If you want to talk about this offline, I'd be happy to do that, and we'll have a conversation on this in January. Second item is just I wanted to follow up on a request that I made last month, which was to have in the general manager's report when a member of the public comes to speak at our meeting and has some sort of complaint or issue with Dash that requires staff follow-up, and we've often said, well, someone on staff will follow up with you. I wanted to get an update in the next month's packet about just simply how that issue was resolved and what the follow-up was. And so you'll see in the general manager's report that Josh has done that from speakers that we had last month. And I just wanted to clarify that the reasons behind that request and to make sure, and I know Josh's staff, many of them are listening in who handle customer service. And I just wanted to make clear that I am not looking to be a customer service person at Dash or to have the board engage and drawn into resolving complaints or discussing strategies for how we respond to citizens who bring problems forward. What I was really wanting to understand is that sometimes at meetings, people will come back and say, hey, I was here last month and this issue is still ongoing. Or you run into people at, grocery stores or other places and they say, oh, you're with Dash. I was here last month and I'm concerned because this issue that I had hasn't been addressed. And so I wanted to have some just awareness of how issues that are raised to the board are resolved. And I also think that's helpful to us because it teaches us a little more about how does Dash work behind the scenes. But it is not my intention that we get into the nitty-gritty in discussing how some of those issues are being handled. And I realized because I was making I was reacting to things I heard and kind of made a request as I was thinking about it that I may not have been fully clear in how in what my intention was. And so I just wanted to take a moment to address that as part of my report. I appreciate that Josh has provided this information, I think in a way that's very useful. We will continue to look at that and refine that with feedback from the customer service staff and from Joseph as we go forward on this to make sure that we're respecting kind of what our role is in looking at that. So I just wanted to make that statement, and I appreciate staff's work in trying to respond to that and ensure that we have useful information so that we can, if we are engaging with folks who have come to us at the board level, that we understand how things are being taken care of. But at the same time, also respecting that the primary way and the fastest way to get assistance with Dash inquiries is to go through the normal customer service system, and that we have a very robust system and we have very good and experienced people who answer the phone and respond to emails, and that is the primary vehicle for resolving complaints. But that with a public comment period, we respect that people are able to come forward and to raise matters to our level, and just that then we understand how those are handled. So I just want to take a moment to address the two items I had. The only other thing I want to say is I wish all of you happy holidays, however you celebrate, and wish you all a bright new year, and look forward to seeing you in January. I'll go ahead and recognize you for the T&ES Director's Report.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good evening. We just heard from Mr. Jinks, but in the T&ES Director's Report, I did add a little bit of information about the new city manager who was announced earlier this month by City Council. Jim Parajon, I think that's how you pronounce it, will be Alexandria's next city manager. He's going to start in mid-January, and I believe Mr. Jinks is staying on right up until he leaves. So he actually comes to us from Arlington, Texas. He is a deputy city manager there. He comes from a planning background, and he has also worked on the East Coast in Raleigh, North Carolina, as well as Cary, North Carolina, and I believe he was raised in Pennsylvania. So he does come from the East Coast. So we're excited to have him and see how that goes. Next week, just an update on Duke Street in Motion, our Duke Street BRT project. I tend to update you all pretty much every month on this. This is really big project for TES. So I want to just make sure that the board is staying up to date and in the loop on kind of what we're doing with that project and how it's moving forward. As you know, we did a lot of community engagement over the end of the summer and the fall, and we're working to compile all of that information and feedback from the community. We had done some additional outreach in the fall, which is why the schedule is a bit more delayed, but we really felt that it was important to reach out to the groups who are using transit and make sure we were hearing those voices and incorporating that into our feedback. We are currently working to get a design consultant on board, and they're going to partner for a little while with our community engagement team as we kind of define the vision for the corridor and then start to work through some conceptual designs with the community to really think about what the corridor could look like and how it could function for VRT. Next, maybe less exciting from the future BRT project, we have the WMATA budget. So WMATA in November, they did discuss our general manager's proposed budget for FY23. The budget includes a continuation of the September 2021 service levels for bus and rail. There were also some changes to the fares, and then the 23 budget proposal also includes some fare changes, such as late $2 late night rail fares, discounted monthly passes, and a couple other discounts and benefits for using a Smart Trip card. Lastly, the I-395 ramps at Seminary Road. I don't recall if we talked about this previously, but Transurban, which is the company that runs VDOT's express lane projects, they had worked with the city back in 2018, 2019 to talk about the possibility of shifting the HOV ramps from Seminary Road. So when you're on 395, if you're in the express lanes right now, you can only exit the express lanes if you're HOV. Not HOT. So the people that are paying to use the express lanes with HOT are not able to use those ramps. So Transurban and VDOT had let the city know that they were looking at converting those to HOV and HOT ramps, and they were doing a study on that. They had a public meeting back in December of 2019, and then the project kind of just was put on hold during COVID. In 2019, the city did submit a letter to VDOT saying that we didn't see a compelling reason to convert that to HOV and HOT. They did an intersection modification report and a large traffic analysis, which the city did not find any fault with their analysis. What it showed really was that there were minimal, if any, impacts in the city. There were actually some decreases in traffic delay in the city projected. Most of the decreases were on the actual general purpose lanes of the interstate. But there was a 2012 city resolution that related to this. And so the city is holding consistent with our opinion that the ramp should stay HOV only. And VDOT hosted a public meeting to get feedback from the community Monday of this week. And their presentation is online if anyone is interested in that topic. So I believe that is all I have tonight. I'm happy to take any questions.
Hillary, just a couple of questions for you. One, have you met the new city manager?
I met him very briefly. Jan was able to take him around down at Business Center Drive. He met some of our frontline staff, and I happened to be having a meeting down there when he was walking through the traffic management center. So I got to meet him for a quick second.
Okay. I want to ask your impressions of him then. So,
he was great. It's really tough to gauge in a couple of minutes, but I've heard positive things.
Good, good. On the WMATA budget, I know we had talked about either last month or the month before about the 11Y, and it sounded like there was some interest among, maybe the mayor was advocating for restoring that. And if there's advocacy that we should do during the budget process, or especially in line with either something that council's doing or Transportation Commission or other groups, we certainly would like to be informed of those efforts so that we can sign on and kind of have a unified front.
Yeah, I can talk to our WMATA liaison and make sure she is aware. So if we hear that, we would certainly know if any letter is coming from the mayor from the other boards and commissions, and I can make sure to get that in front of this board as well.
Okay, what do you think would be the timing of such an effort?
I would think we need to do it by January.
Oh, okay.
All
right.
The WMATA budget, to be honest, we get different iterations of it, and when the final passage is, all I remember is that it tends to be very late in terms of when we are passing our budget. It's kind of a lot of last minute shuffling. But that is, so I believe that's usually in January.
Okay. And I guess maybe you and I can talk after the new year, but we do the January agenda and just see if we should, have time for, or a draft of a letter to consider circulating if there, is anything that we want to comment on.
Sure, I will flag it with Jen.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Hillary before we move on? All right, thank you, Hillary, for your report. We always set aside time for board members who serve on other groups, commissions, to share with us anything that would be for the benefit of the group. So I'll open the floor if there's any announcements anyone would like to make. Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead into item 4, the general manager's report. So Josh, I'll recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. It's good to see you. Happy December. Can't believe that the holidays are right around the corner. If you're anything like me, you're not prepared in the least bit. But I hear it's supposed to be 72 degrees this weekend. So believe it or not, that might be the time to get it done. All joking aside, it's a pleasure to be here. And my first item on the agenda is to introduce a new staff member. Edward Ryder is here with us this evening for an introduction. He started on Monday with Dash as our new Director of Finance and Administration. As you are aware, the position was vacated by Evan Davis, who joined the city in a leadership position a little over a month ago. In fact, today, Evan was here at Dash training Edward. So very thankful for that and for Edward's hard work. I would imagine he's probably pretty exhausted at this point with the information. But I will allow him to introduce himself. I'll simply say to the board, we're very excited to have him at Dash. We worked very hard to find someone of Edward's caliber who could join the team, be an active member of the organization, and had a passion for what we do. And Edward checked all those boxes and then some. The team met with him multiple times to learn about his background and his experience. And I won't take any further from him and just simply say welcome to Edward. We're very much looking forward to working with you and welcome to your role here on the board. And I'll turn it over to you to for a brief introduction.
Thank you, Josh. I'm excited to be here. Quick background on me. I'm joining Dash from serving as a finance director of finance and operations at a full service creative and web development agency. And I bring that background in finance to Dash. I also bring a lifelong passion for transit. I'm an avid transit user. It's always been an interest of mine and something I feel very passionate about. I see transit as such an essential part of our community. And I'm excited to join an organization such as Dash that values the important role that transit plays. In addition to that passion, I also have experience as a advisory neighborhood commissioner in Washington, D.C., where I work very closely with the district's Department of Transportation on a number of transportation issues, such as bus and bike lanes along Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast, and addressing some of the pedestrian and safety concerns on some of the exchanges with 695 that impact my neighborhood. So, as I said, I'm very excited to join Dash. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. And I sprung on him that tonight he had to be introduced to the board in his first week on his third day. And then he informed me that it's his mother's birthday. So he's going to sign off and have a great celebration with his family. And I thank you for sticking around. And I also said this was the last meeting he was off the hook, or the only meeting he's off the hook from having to talk to you all about finance matters. I'll continue to carry that torch today. But as I mentioned, you all will see Edward at all future board meetings, and he will continue to acclimate himself to Dash and play the primary role in our finance and administration responsibilities. So.
Thank you, Josh. And I look forward to speaking with the board in the next meeting. Thank you.
All right, moving right along, just a great fact I wanted to share here. In fact, this didn't make it in the board packet, but we're at 93% fully vaccinated here at Dash now of our workforce, and we're very happy with that. And the remaining small portion of the workforce that is not vaccinated is either pursuing it currently or is complying with our mandatory testing requirements. So we've continued to see success in that program. As our chair mentioned that in his comments, I did provide within the board packet a summary of the follow-up activities related to the inquiries that were received in the past board meeting. And based off your feedback and any other feedback you'd like to provide this evening, we'll continue to do that as such matters arise that require a follow-up, and we'll let you all know kind of the outcome of those. I did want to just reiterate to those who are watching now or may watch in the future how to reach us. We are available at 703-746-DASH or dashbus@alexandriava.gov. But all of our contact information is available on our website, dashbus.com. And there's a lot of resources there now, and there will be in the future as we continue to build out those resources for our passengers to see how to use the system and how to provide feedback and get inquiries responded to. So just a follow-up item there. And I have a very brief report this month. So Mr. Chair, I will pause for any questions or turn it back over to you to if we're able to move on to the financials.
Well, Josh, hearing no questions, we'll have you dive into the financials.
Okay. This is also a brief report. The full detailed financials are provided within your packet. I will simply summarize where we are for you in our current fiscal year. October shows a month-end deficit of about $1.3 million, and want to explain some of the factors that contribute to that. The primary factors are the timing of appropriations of grant reimbursements for the I-395 Commuter Choice Program, which funds heavily the lines 35 and 36. Again, that is funding that comes from the 395 express lanes that Hillary was actually speaking about in her report. This is also a month that is always a little off because it is a 3 payroll month. And that is a big contributing factor, as well as the personnel costs, which are also resolved through the 395 funds. I will note now, and you'll probably hear more from me and Edward over time as to how the sky-high fuel prices are affecting Dash. We often get the question when fuel comes up, and I'll just preemptively answer it, how we secure fuel. We do shop our fuel. We do not have a fixed price contract where some organizations do. There are pros and cons of both, but we have found over time that historically it has been more beneficial, particularly when fuel was very low. We were able to take advantage of those prices. We are subject to the risk of rising fuel prices, but certainly my hope is that as the years move on and we continue to advance our electrification program, this will become less and less of a discussion item. So we're keeping an eye on all these items, but we're confident that they are all resolvable or in line with our expectations. Where I'll point attention to is the deficit resolution, and just highlight the second item here, which is the TRIP program. At the last meeting, I reported to you that we had a favorable recommendation from the Department of Rail and Public Transportation in funding our Virginia TRIP, or Transit Ridership Incentive Program application, which helps to offset, not fully, but offset a portion of the cost of going fare free. The Commonwealth Transportation Board met yesterday and today, and I received confirmation from the Department of Rail and Public Transportation that they did, in fact, fully approve the recommended allocations for us, which accounts over the course of 3 years of $7.1 million. This is a really great win for us, and we're really happy and excited that the state saw our program as one that was worth funding under this. I will also note that it was oversubscribed. So there were some systems who applied for funding and didn't receive it. They are recommended to receive that funding should allocations change. And we are also continuing to advocate and working with Sarah our legislative director, Sarah Graham Taylor. I'm messing up her name. Why am I blanking on her name? Anyway, Sarah, if you're watching,
you got it. Yes. Sarah
you know
Taylor.
I know who you are. But we appreciate the advocacy in working to revise some language in there that is restrictive of these funds and prioritizes certain other applications over the free and low fare programs, which we have found to be much more favorable in a post-pandemic transit environment. So with that allocation, it fully resolves our projected year-end deficit and then some, and it puts us in a great position going into the budget time that we're in right now, as far as contributing an offset to the cost of the fare free program. So, oh, I saw a hand go up.
Yes.
You
So
got me before I went on.
is that trip money just for operational funds?
Correct.
Not cap. Okay. And then the other question is what, because that deficit is concerning. If you added the 395 funds and only had a 2-pay period, just ballpark, what would the deficit be for the month?
I think you're asking another way. Are you asking what is the impact of the fuel?
No, not that, not the fuel, but the 3 payroll, for instance. How much extra is that third payroll?
That's a good detailed question that I would have to look in the fine print for you. What I would say is that it is not uncommon, has not been uncommon in the past for us to have delayed allocations and appropriations of the funds that are back due. It has to go through a city process. Again, one I'm not intricately aware of, but it takes a number of months. So we do tend to see a buildup of a deficit over that time prior to those reimbursements making their way through the city and into the dash org.
Okay, I mean, because I am somewhat concerned with our deficits and the flow of money that seems to be coming and going based on what's available, and obviously we can't rely on this. If it's a 3-year program or whatever. We may get a little happy and giddy with the money coming in, but then the bill's going to come due down the road, and we'll have adjusted to these funds that won't be there anymore. So, what do we do? Is there a way we can sort of tighten our belts now while this money's coming in, and then save more for a rainy day? And maybe this is something our new fiscal person will be able to figure out.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it is something for Edward to dive a little deeper into. I think that there may be a couple of different things that we're talking about simultaneously, and they all sort of have a different impact. We'll flag this as a follow-up item and get you a more intricate kind of breakout of what is contributing to the deficit and what are the factors that resolve that. I tuned in though to your comment about the fare and the fare offset from the TRIP program, and I think that's a notable exception here. The grant reimbursements and the timing of that and the 3 payrolls, again, because our budget is for a year and it's the same each month. When you have these offsets, which can be hundreds of thousands of dollars offsets just in payroll alone, one dash payroll is in excess of $500,000. So, a big piece of October is that one payroll. Again, that happens every year. But when it comes to the TRIP program and the offsetting of the fares, you raise a good point. And that is that program is 3 years. of funding with a fourth year required commitment to being fare free, meaning that as a condition of taking this money, we are 4 years fare free. And that last year, there is no money from TRIP. And that is something that both this board signed on to and City Council signed on to. So it is publicly noted that City Council has acknowledged as a condition of the application for these funds that we have to make that work. When it comes to this year's deficit challenges that we have that have largely been because of the unpredictability related to the pandemic, the service levels of what were provided, when the ATV was implemented, all that kind of stuff. This is a very rocky year for us. Next year's budget is very solidly built to ensure that we capture everything it takes that costs to run DASH. So there should not be a reason that DASH would enter a deficit position next year, even without TRIP, because when we made the budget, we submitted assuming that there was not TRIP funding for the current services that we provide. Now, during the budget process, the TRIP money will be added back in, which will then lower in turn the city's general fund contribution. But we will stay aware and tuned into the fact that that general fund contribution will tick up year over year naturally because of various other factors. And then it will take a big bump after the third year of this TRIP program in order to sustain service as required and to remain fare free. After year 4, my expectation is that our fare free framework would kick in if there was discussion about changing course as it related to fares. So hopefully that gives you some sense, and certainly happy to kind of dive into it more once Edward's kind of gotten on his feet and knows kind of how things are working. But I'm hopeful that gives a little bit of reassurance. You're right, it's a big number, but October is particularly big, and a lot of it has to do with those payrolls. Okay. So yeah, just shoot me a note on the side if there's further questions you have, and I will compile those and bring those back to the board as a report. All right. Looking for any other hands. Mr. Chair, I don't see any other hands, so I'll leave it to you to call the next portion of tonight's meeting.
Yeah, Josh, I'll just ask one question related to kind of following up on Matt and something you'd mentioned in the report about the cost controls. And I think you had said in the report that you were looking at things like travel and training as a way to save money. Sort of, is that having an impact on the organization at this point, or sort of do you have an amount of money that you're sort of looking to save from that as you kind of manage some of those cost controls? And are there other things you would look at if the deficit continues to grow? You know, it seems like fuel being one of the bigger variables.
Well, I would say that yes, we have deferred and held off on a lot of the continuing education efforts that we always hope to ensure are available to DASH staff and make sure we're keeping our workforce updated on everything that applies to them and their jobs. We have been doing this since day one, and we have been running really lean since day one. The TRIP money, as it's allocated, releases a lot of that pressure. So to say, to use a metaphor, it allows us to loosen the belt slightly, but we're going to do that on a slower process. In other words, once TRIP is in place, we're going to keep watching the fiscal situation over the coming couple of months and see how that's going to forecast out before we fully loosen the belt back to what was originally budgeted. The money for training and continuing education and all those kinds of ancillary things that, quite frankly, depending on who you are, sometimes organizations will trim all of that and say, well, that's not really important or relevant. I happen to be very strongly opinionated that it is a very important part of investing in your workforce and making sure that they're kept up to date. So although we haven't pulled it out, we have been restraining the spending of it. So it sits kind of unspent, and we'll continue to do that and analyze as we go forward. So we are being very, very cautious as we've gone throughout this year. We've known this since early on. We'll continue to do so. we don't want to end up in any kind of a situation where we're too tight. But I will say, when you look at past fiscal years, Dash has come in right on line. So what we're budgeting for is what we're spending, and what we're doing is what we're saying we're doing. This is an off year for that. This is unusual for us. And we again, put a lot of effort into making sure that for future years, we're accounting for everything that is anticipated in a proper budgeting process.
Thank you. Anybody else before we move off the financials? All right, if not, Josh, you can go ahead and recognize.
Can I say
Linda,
one thing?
yeah.
Sorry. Hi,
Go ahead.
this is Linda. So I was looking at the detailed budget sheet, and it does look like wages, so operating expenses for personnel came in twice the budgeted for the current month. So I think you already said we'll go back and take a look at that, but I would just want to ask to go back and look at some of the recent changes we've made, just to think about how those specifically have impacted it, and whether, for example, the longer operations, I know we switched to I think 3 shifts, is that right? And things like that. If those are structural changes that maybe we didn't anticipate fully, how they were going to play out, and just make sure that those are going to be integrated in the budget going forward, to make sure we're going to end up in the right place. And that is, like, I think that if I'm reading it correctly, the budgeted amount was about 1.1 million for operations personnel, and it came in at 2.2 million. So that is a big chunk of the deficit. And like you said, some of that could be the additional payroll, but it shouldn't be twice that, I guess. So just maybe take a look at that and just think about whether some of those other structural changes we made are gonna be something we should anticipate going forward and address.
Yeah, let me just make sure I'm looking at the same line you're looking at. So we're on the detailed page 13.
Yeah, 13. There's a the second section is operating expenditures, operations, and then the first subsection is total operations personnel is the subtotal line.
That's right.
And for current months, it says 2.2 million actual, 1.13 million budget, and the variance is 1.078 million.
Right. So certainly we'll flag that for Edward to talk a little bit more about the contributing factors there. That is something that we've seen each month of this fiscal year, and it rolls up. So as you look over to the far right, the last 3 columns of any one of those lines is our annual budget for that section, right? And then our projection based on historical and forward looking. So we look at each month's payroll, the factors that go into that, and then you end up with that 429,000. And you're right, a lot of that has largely been affected by the expansion of service, the factors that have contributed to the needs supporting that service. The other factors here have been challenges with recruiting, overtime, the cost of providing the service when you're in an overtime situation. So certainly all factors, there's a lot of different things that can kind of go into that. And I do appreciate and acknowledge the board's concern specific to the month and year. And we'll make sure that, that was already a discussion item that I had with Edward, was just to kind of take a look at where we are, what the budget's looking like, and confer with Evan's projections that he was making prior to leaving, and actually has still been reviewing this in the interim and helping to provide the projections for year end. When you get down to the bottom here, where you have that projected year end net surplus or deficit, the very bottom right cell of 1.89, the TRIP program is bringing in 2.4 in new revenue. So that will more than resolve it. But acknowledging that in the budgeting process, for future years, we now have a better grasp, much better grasp of what the requirements are staffing wise and hours wise, and projecting overtime, because here we are, before some members were on this board, we struggled a lot with overtime, particularly before our salaries changed. And we're back in that arena. We're back in an arena where we can't get people onboarded fast enough. We can't get enough applications in. There are many people who are making a lot of money right now in overtime. And that's something that we're seeing everywhere. So again, another factor that was not accounted for, not anticipated in this budget process, but we have worked hard to anticipate it better in the upcoming fiscal year.
Thanks, Josh. I think this is a very good discussion. I look forward to having some opportunities to delve more deeply into the financials as we go forward. So appreciate the questions. Josh, do you want to introduce this item, or do you want to just turn it over to Martin?
You're welcome to turn it over, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
This is this is good numbers.
It is. It is. So Martin, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the board. Martin Barney, Director of Planning and Marketing. So for item 6, the planning report, I have an update on our system performance. This data focuses on the month of October, which is of particular interest to us because that is the first full month since we rolled out the new Dash network and the free fares on September 5th. So we were looking forward in great anticipation to the month of October and the data that we would get from that. I will caution before I get into the data, as we've noted, there's a lot of positive stories that are shown in this data. It is still very early though. And, given some of the things that have been discussed with, fuel prices and COVID and, a number of other factors, there is a potential for volatility in terms of ridership over the coming months. So I do just want to caveat that, but I do think that these numbers are a sign for cautious optimism. So with that being said, looks like I've got control here, Josh, I think.
Can you confirm that? Because I was having trouble getting it to activate, but if not, I'll certainly, if you can't get it to advance, I'll advance for you.
Okay. Might not be working, but I'll just go ahead and see and ask you to advance if needed.
Okay.
Okay, so overall system-wide, we've got some really positive trends. We drew over 250,000 boardings in October, which was by far the highest that we've had since the start of the pandemic. That was a 50% increase from August to October over the 2-month period there. And that brings us up to about 72% of our pre-COVID ridership levels at a system-wide level. That's pretty strong. We've been seeing 50% or less for most of this year. And other agencies are still in that 50 to 60% range. So really, really good to see that 72% number. And I have a few more graphs that will show that as well. Next slide, please. So hopefully you can see this one. This is the smallest graph I'll show of all my slides. So it gets better after this one. But this shows just month-to-month ridership for Dash over the last 4 years. The colors kind of signify the year. So you can see, you can start with blue, which is FY19, and then solid green is FY20. And you can see that the striped lines represent data during COVID. So you can see the striped green lines on the right side show where we had that fall off in the spring of 2020, particularly April and May of 2020. You can see the red striped lines show FY21, which was last fiscal year. So we kind of were relatively stable for that year, low but stable. And then the striped gray lines are the ones for this fiscal year, the last 4 months. So you can really see where Josh is indicating the last couple of months, particularly September, October, we saw major increases from 170,000 in August to 215,000 in September and 256,000 in October. So really positive news there. Next slide, Josh. So this is the same numbers, but shown in comparison to a couple of other agencies in Northern Virginia. So you can see that we did have that 50% growth from the blue, which is August, to the gray in October. Other agencies also saw increases, but they were much more modest, more in the 3 to 8% range for ARC, Fairfax Connector, and the Metro bus routes in our immediate vicinity. So in the sense that we would attribute some of this growth to seasonality and people coming back from the office or back to office from the summertime and back to school in the summertime, or maybe the COVID receding a little bit. We can see that, we're still tracking above what other comparable agencies are doing. So we're still doing better than we would expect. Next slide, please. So I mentioned we're tracking our ridership and service as compared to pre-COVID, which we use 2018 and 2019 as the benchmark for that. So you can see the blue line shows our ridership percentage from pre-COVID. We from January to August of this year, we're in the 40 to 50% range. And as I mentioned, we're now up to about 72% for October. And I think November, we're seeing what will probably continue to rise. And then you can see the orange line shows service levels, which are important to kind of provide additional context. So you can see that we were at reduced service levels for most of this year up until September, when we introduced the new network and some additional funding through the commuter choice program. And through that, we were able to increase our service to above what it was pre-COVID. So you can see that shown there. Next slide, please. So kind of going along with that theme of showing ridership relative to the amount of service that's being provided. This graph shows our boardings per revenue hour for the month of October for the last 5 years. So you can see that prior to the pandemic, we were drawing well over 20 boardings per revenue hour. We obviously went well down to less than 10 per hour during 2020, but we're seeing that recover up to close to 15 boardings per revenue hour, both weekday, Saturday, and Sunday for 2020, October 2021. So not quite back to where we want to be from pre-pandemic, but we are seeing that trending in the right direction, and we would expect that as riders return, that will continue to trend upwards. Next slide, please. So kind of diving a little bit deeper, kind of breaking down by day of the week. We can overall, I'll just kind of say that we are seeing that the majority of ridership outside of the peak periods is returning to pre-COVID ridership levels. So middays, weekday middays, weekday evenings, and weekends are mostly back to 100% of pre-COVID levels, if not slightly higher. So that's really great to see, and kind of is to be expected with some of the changes that we've made with the new network. The areas that were still lower than we were back in 2018 and 2019, not surprisingly, as Chairman Kaplan mentioned, are the peaks. We're still down about 30 to 40% in the AM and PM rush hours. I've covered most of this. Geographically, West Alexandria, line 35, has seen the largest increase. I have a graph that'll show that. And our frequent all-day service, the 31, 35, and 36s, those are among our highest performers. So really good to see the frequent network is generating a lot of ridership. Next slide, please. So this one shows the last 5 years, October daily ridership by day type. So the blue is weekday. So you can see that from 2017 to 2021, we're still not quite back to where we were before the pandemic on weekdays. But for Saturdays and Sundays, the gray and the orange bars, you can see that we are close on Saturdays. I think we're up to about 95% of pre-pandemic levels. And then on Sundays, we're actually above where we were before the pandemic. So really good to see that the weekend ridership has risen back to above pre-pandemic levels. Now, in terms of time of day, this is all weekday data, but you can see early AM is before 6 a.m. You've got the AM peak from 6 to 9, midday from 9 to 3, and then PM peak 3 to 7. And then after that, it's just evening. So you can see the different years there, dark blue being 2017, light blue being 2021. So for early AM, midday, and evening, we are back to or above 100% of pre-pandemic levels. I should say close to pre-pandemic levels. Midday, we are still slightly below, but we're pretty close there. But then if you look at the second and fourth grouping, the peak periods, the light blue line is still fairly below what we saw back in 2017, 2018, and 2019. I believe we're down by, I think it's 40% during AM week, AM peak. So we're about 60% of pre-pandemic ridership for the AM peak, and about 70% of pre-pandemic ridership during the PM peak. So really, we're seeing that maybe the early risers are not rising so early or are teleworking, but the PM peak is coming back a little bit strong. Okay, and now you can see it by route. So you can see how the different routes are performing on weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. Line 35 is the standout. That's the West End route that I mentioned. We're seeing 3,200 boardings per weekday on that route. So really, really strong performer there, which is, obviously one of that is our most frequent route, running every 10 minutes on weekdays and every 15 on weekends. So you can see even the weekend ridership is well above 2,000 per Saturday or per Sunday. So really, really good ridership on the West End. Lines 30, 31, also doing well. Couple of notes I might make here. One of the surprises that I've noted is line 30, which is our Duke Street route, which effectively replaced the AT8 almost trip for trip. It was the same routing, same headway, same schedule. So that's kind of almost a control in the experiment here. The ridership has grown on that, but it used to be kind of the number one route in the system, and it hasn't come back quite as strong as some of the other routes. So I think that's due to one of two factors, or maybe both factors. One is that WMATA improved their Metrobus service on Duke Street, so we may be seeing some riders. The 28A now goes on Duke Street, and the 29s have increased their frequency. So you're getting really frequent service from Metrobus. So we could see some of the riders going over to Metrobus. It's also interesting that it may indicate that free fares in themselves are not as strong a ridership draw as higher frequency. Because if you look at line 36, which is similar to our old AT9, the routing is pretty similar, but we've actually increased the service pretty dramatically, especially on Saturdays and Sundays with our commuter choice funding. And that one is doing quite well. Prior to the pandemic, the AT9 drew about 500 boardings per weekday. You can see that the 36, which is its replacement, is drawing close to 1,000. So, little signs, early signs, but we're trying to kind of pick and see what we can figure out from that early data. So maybe one or two more slides here, Josh. This is another one that shows route by route. You can see that line 35 is accounting for over a third of our total ridership on weekdays. Actually, I'm sorry, this is total monthly ridership. The routes shown in red are our frequent all-day routes. So between the three of those, you're talking about 58% of our ridership is on frequent routes. The frequent all-day routes, 31, 36 is 35. Less than 5% of our total ridership is due to the 100 series, which are the weekday only routes. So those are shown in green there. Next slide, Josh. This one just shows boardings per revenue hour. So relative, ridership relative to the amount of service on each of these routes. So you can see that there are some routes that perform better than others. Some of these are kind of odd just based on the amount of service. Like if you're only running hourly service, you might have an artificially high boardings per revenue hour because you have fewer revenue hours. But just wanted to share this as well in case it was of interest. Next slide, please. So these last couple of slides are more about reliability. And this data is taken from Metro Hero, which is a platform, a third-party platform. It's publicly available online. They have an Aries tool that tracks all the different agencies' performance on-time performance, schedule adherence, and data reliability in real time. So you can see the website there in the top right corner of the graph if you're interested. You can actually click on Dash when you go in there to see a route by route breakdown. But this is the month by month stats for on-time performance, which is basically how close to the scheduled arrival times each of your trips are. And they consider a trip if it's less than 2 minutes early or less than, I think it's 7 minutes late, it's considered to be on time. So you can see the dash is the blue line, and we are outperforming the other agencies that are included on this platform. We've been over 90% for the entire year. So we're quite proud of that. We did have some running time challenges in September, October, because we had some new routes that we kind of weren't sure about what their running time would be, but even with that, we didn't see any fall off. So we're quite proud of this one. Next slide, Josh. Okay, and this is headway adherence, which is a slightly different measure. If a route is supposed to come every 30 minutes, this tracks whether it comes within every 27 to 33 minutes. They give you 3 minutes leeway either way. So again, you can see the dash is the blue line, and we're doing pretty well, 85% almost for most of the year. We did have a dip in September, which was due to some ITS issues with our line 30 that have since been resolved. So you can see back in November that we've come back up to our 80, low 80s% threshold. So very, very happy to see that. Next slide. And then this last one is just showing overall uptime liability for our real-time data. So the percentage of time that customers can count on our ridership or our real-time data being available for them. A lot of times real-time data might not be available due to drivers not logging in properly or other issues with the technical issues with our database. But you can see that we are doing relatively well, usually above 95% of the time having our real-time information up and running. Again, we did have a technical issue in September with our database then, but we've resolved that. So you can see we're back up above 95%. I think that's the last slide I have. So happy to take any questions or go back and talk about any graphs. Yeah, Hillary.
Yeah, thanks for that, Martin. That's very encouraging and exciting stats there. So I did have one question, and maybe it's the boardings per revenue hour, but I'm wondering if there is an easy way to look at basically the number of, like, we've increased service, so we have a lot more buses out and running now. So is there a way to kind of like use that and normalize to see the increase in service based on like pre-COVID levels or something? So if revenue hours, is that like per bus route when we look at revenue hours? Is that
right? Yeah, so that's what we're trying to do with the boardings per revenue hour. I had a system-wide boardings per revenue hour, and then I have the graph that's up now, which is the route by route. So that takes into consideration, you know, if you're running 3 buses on a route, that's, you know, fewer revenue hours than if you're running 6 buses on a route. So usually you can kind of normalize it based on the amount of service you're running. And so we have taken I didn't have the graph here, but we have taken a look at some of those. The challenge is that we don't have always have apples to apples comparisons for most routes, because the routes have changed pretty dramatically. You know, there's 2 or 3 routes that are pretty much exactly the same. So we could, you know, show those. I think they're still obviously down from pre-pandemic, but I don't think it's very dramatic. The AT8, for example, AT8 and line 30, I think it was down slightly on board per revenue hour, but it's hard to.
I'm wondering, I'm actually thinking system-wide would be almost more useful than route by route, because the routes have changed, but because we have put so many more buses into the system, looking at it that way, I would just be curious to see how that compares to pre-COVID levels, and if that's some indication of kind of maybe the fare free increases, or maybe it's the increase in service, but like what that comparison looks like system-wide, just kind of overall.
Yeah, and Josh, can you go back? I think it's maybe 4 or 5 slides to a couple more. One more, I think. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So this is system-wide, weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you can see, you know, we were relatively, you know, above 20 boardings per revenue hour across the system for 2017, 2018, 2019. Big dip in 2020, and then we recovered a little bit in 2021, but not quite back to where we are. You know, that is because we added service. I think that probably made these numbers lower than they would be otherwise. But you can see that we're trending in the right direction for now. Does that kind of get at what you were asking about? I mean, we can dig into these a little bit more for next month if that helps.
No, I think I'm just curious, like so when you say we have more service, so what I'm trying to figure out is something that accounts for the additional service, right? Like if you have more service, you have more buses running. So taking that into consideration and kind of using that to look at, I guess, boardings or ridership, whatever it is, compared to like buses in service per hour, which is I'm assuming is.
So that's what this is. That's what this is. So revenue hours represents the amount of service that you're running. So if we're increasing service and the ridership is staying the same, the boardings per revenue hour will go down. So if you have, you know, a bus route that's running 10 revenue hours and you have 100 boardings, versus if it's running 50 revenue hours, you still only have 100 boardings, and that'll capture that.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Okay. Sure.
I just want to ask, so, well, first of all, Martin, the very, very encouraging news. And for those who follow the mayor on Twitter, he actually tweeted out about this and saying something to the effect of, if you run more buses to places that people want to go, look what happens. So these are really important statistics, and something that we need to continue to raise the community, because we've made a substantial investment running our transit. I just wanted to ask, in terms of going forward, how you envision presenting this to us, and sort of the frequency.
Yeah, that's a good question, and one that Josh and I have kind of been talking about a little bit on and off for the last couple weeks here. We're in the process of kind of building a KPI report that would have some ridership metrics that we're tracking. The report would be available on our new website that's planned to be launched in the next couple of weeks here, and also would be included in the monthly board packet. We had originally thought we were going to be able to show you a rough draft of what that ridership or the KPI report would look like at this meeting, but I think we're going to plan to do that in January instead, to give us a little extra time to refine it a little bit. So there will be, I'm open to suggestions. If you would want to see route by route, if you want to see boardings per revenue hour, we could certainly do that. But open to suggestions if there's anything in particular that jumps out at you as of interest.
I think in the past, I know we used to get, and Martin, I think you were here when this was going on, very voluminous amounts of information on every route. And I think there was feedback from some of the board members at the time that we really wanted to kind of dive into trends, or to look at specific segments, so that way we as a board could kind of weigh in on some of that. And I think some of the reports that you're running here are getting more at, what do we need to be aware of, and to Hillary's point about how we compare what existed before to what's there now. But I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. But also, this is still very encouraging. And the other question I have is just about, are we seeing crowding on any routes? And is that being addressed?
We are not to my knowledge on a widespread basis. There were some reports on line 35 in the early mornings that we were having some trips that were a little bit more crowded than expected. We had a service change that went into effect on Sunday, which was our first service change since the new network. And we were able to add a few trips in the early morning to help address that. So I think we were able to address that one, but we're still keeping our eyes on passenger loads to see if anything crops up. But yeah, nothing to report right as of yet.
Anybody else? All right, well, Martin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we have an executive session to go into tonight, but I'll just go ahead and announce the next meeting now, while the public is still with us. Next regular meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors is scheduled for Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. And I believe that would be still a remote electronic meeting, pending further guidance from the city. And then I will ask if someone will make a motion to enter executive session. The wording is on the screen.
Sure, Mr. Chair. I, Matt Harris, hereby move that the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing legal and personnel matters pursuant to section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia. Sorry.
Moved by Matt. Is there a second?
Second.
Larry, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, we will let staff transition to the executive session.